Snow was falling hard over Timber Ridge when the town gathered to honor a hero, a German shepherd who had once been left for dead. But just as the applause faded and the medals shone under the winter sun, something shifted. From the edge of the crowd, a man no one recognized stood watching, his limp uneven, his stare locked not on the dog, but on the former seal beside him. That night, as the celebration turned to quiet and the streets emptied, Jack Mercer felt it. The sense that some ghosts don't stay buried, and some wars never really end. When Scout lifted his head at the sound of boots crunching outside the cabin, Jack knew this peace might only be the calm before another storm. What secret had followed them back from the fire? What truth was still waiting beneath the snow? Stay with us to the end. And if you believe that loyalty never dies, comment where you're watching from, or type Amen for every bond that survives the darkness. Timber Ridge, Colorado. Present-day snow was falling hard over Timber Ridge that night. Slow, heavy flakes that blurred the outlines of the pine-covered mountains and muffled even the sound of passing trucks. The streets were half empty, lamps flickering gold through the haze. Only one place still glowed bright at the edge of Main Street. The Blue Spruce Grill, the kind of mountain town restaurant that smelled of hickory smoke and buttered bread, promising warmth against the cold outside. Inside, laughter mingled with the hiss of the fireplace. Locals nursed craft beers, travelers defrosted beside steaming bowls of chili. Near the back window, a man sat alone nursing a mug of black coffee. Jack Mercer, 38, ex-Navy SEAL, broad-shouldered and square-jawed, had that look veterans carry, watchful, restrained, with a tiredness that didn't reach his eyes, but lived somewhere deeper. His hair was short and dark, shot with early gray at the temples. A faint scar ran from his chin to his neck, a reminder from a mission in Syria that ended with too many body bags. Since retiring 6 months ago, he'd rented a cabin outside town, taking odd repair jobs and keeping mostly to himself. Timber Ridge liked quiet men, and Jack fit the mold. He was halfway through his drink when it came, the faintest sound through the storm. Tap, tap, then silence. He frowned, glancing toward the window where frost coated the glass like powdered sugar. Another tap, softer this time. He rose, chair legs scraping the floor, and walked closer. Through the snow-blurred pane he saw a shape, low, still, almost blending into the night. Then it moved. A German shepherd, large but gaunt, stood pressed against the window. Its coat, once proud black and tan, was matted and crusted with snow. One ear hung torn, the other stood half alert. Frost clung to its whiskers. Beneath the fur, ribs showed faintly through, and its paws bled slightly from contact with the salted streets. For a long moment, man and dog just stared at each other through the glass. Then the dog raised one paw and tapped again, light, rhythmic, almost like a knock. Behind Jack, a voice snapped, "Sir, you'll block the heater if you stand there." He turned. The speaker was Gavin Price, the restaurant's manager, mid-40s, tall and thin, with neatly parted blonde hair and a perfectly ironed vest. His posture screamed control, shoulders back, chin lifted, the kind of man who measured success by how polished the cutlery looked. "We've had strays around all week," Gavin added. "Don't encourage it." Jack ignored him and pushed the door open. A gust of icy wind and snow swept in, drawing gasps from a nearby table. The dog didn't move until Jack knelt down, voice low and even. "Hey, buddy," he murmured. "You trying to come in or just testing my patience?" The shepherd blinked up at him, tail barely twitching, its breath fogged in the cold air. Jack extended his hand, palm up. Slowly, cautiously, the dog sniffed his fingers, then took one hesitant step forward, then another. Inside, Gavin protested. "Sir, that's against code. You can't—" Jack stood, his height and calm authority cutting the argument short. "Relax. He's not staying for dinner. He just needs warmth." Customers had turned to watch. At a corner booth, a woman lifted her phone, recording. She was Mia Turner, 33, owner of the town's only food truck, Mia's Bites, and part-time podcaster, who told true crime stories to her small but loyal online audience. Curly chestnut hair escaped from beneath her beanie, and her cheeks were flushed from the cold. She'd come in to deliver a late order to the bar, but curiosity had pinned her now. Her expression softened as the dog limped across the threshold, following Jack. Jack led the animal to the fireplace near the far wall. The shepherd lay down with a heavy exhale, eyes half closed as if the heat itself was a memory it barely believed. Someone brought a bowl of water, Mia, moving quietly, and placed it nearby. Jack removed his gloves, crouched beside the dog. "You've seen better days," he said softly. Gavin hovered near the counter, arms crossed. "You'll have to clean up after that mutt," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction now. Even he wasn't immune to the sight of frost melting from a starving dog's fur. Mia stepped closer. "Do you know him?" Jack shook his head. "Not yet." The dog's eyes, deep brown, tired but intelligent, locked with his. Then it did something strange. It lifted the same paw, the right one, and tapped once against the wooden floor. Tap. Jack froze. That gesture, he'd seen it before. Years ago, during a joint training exercise in Wyoming, one of the SEAL K-9 units had a German shepherd named Scout, trained to signal permission to advance with a single tap. He remembered the handler laughing, saying the dog thought he was human. But Scout had died, or so they'd said, during a warehouse explosion in Colorado Springs 2 years back. "Where'd you come from, boy?" Jack whispered. The shepherd gave a small whine, as if answering. Mia knelt beside him. "He's got a scar on his right ear," she noted. "Looks old. Maybe frostbite or something worse." Jack studied it. The exact same tear pattern Scout had. A jagged edge healed badly but distinct. His chest tightened. "That's not just any stray." Gavin sighed audibly. "Look, I don't care whose dog it is. Just get him out before someone complains." But no one did. In fact, the restaurant had gone unusually quiet. An older couple nearby had paused mid-meal. A young boy pointed at the dog and smiled. The snow kept falling outside, but inside, warmth spread, not just from the fire, but from something simpler: empathy. Jack reached into his pocket, pulling out a leftover piece of roast chicken from his takeout. He set it near to the dog's paws. The shepherd sniffed once, then ate slowly, methodically, chewing as if remembering manners. No desperation, no greed. "Careful," Mia said, smiling faintly. "He eats more politely than half the folks in here." Jack chuckled. "He's trained, or was." "Name?" He hesitated, then said, "Scout." Her brows rose. "You're sure?" "Let's just say I've got a hunch." The dog finished eating and rested its muzzle on Jack's boot, sighing deeply. Outside, the storm pressed against the windows, a steady white curtain. Inside, a moment hung in the air, quiet, fragile. Mia lowered her camera and whispered almost to herself, "People need to see this." Jack looked up. "See what?" "That kindness still exists," she replied. Her phone light blinked red, recording again. Jack said nothing. He just kept his hand on Scout's head, feeling the faint thump of a heartbeat beneath the fur. For the first time in months, the weight in his chest eased. Somewhere in the background, Gavin muttered about regulations, but no one listened. Not tonight. Not when an old soldier, both man and dog, had found warmth again in a small-town restaurant while snow buried the world outside. The fire popped, scattering embers like stars. Scout stirred, lifted his head once more, and tapped the floor with his paw. One soft tap that echoed like recognition. Jack smiled faintly. "Yeah," he murmured. "I see you, buddy." And for the first time since leaving the Navy, he didn't feel alone. Timber Ridge, Colorado. The following morning. The next morning, the snow had thinned into a brittle frost that glittered across rooftops like shards of glass. The town of Timber Ridge stirred slowly awake, trucks warming their engines, the faint hum of snowplows carving through ice. Jack Mercer's breath fogged against the windshield of his old Ford F-150 as he parked in front of Brooks Veterinary Clinic, a small red brick building with faded letters on its sign. The dog from last night, Scout, sat in the passenger seat, gazing out the window with quiet alertness. In daylight, Jack could see just how worn the animal truly was. Scout's fur was patchy in places, showing healed scars along his ribs. His right ear hung slightly crooked where it had once torn. The brown of his eyes was deep and steady, yet carried that unmistakable dullness of something that had seen too much. Judging by his teeth and joints, he was probably around 10, so old for a working shepherd, but not yet at the edge of weakness. Jack reached over, resting his hand briefly on the dog's shoulder. "Let's see what the doc says, partner." Inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic and cedar shavings. A receptionist, Chloe Bennett, mid-20s, cheerful, with short, honey-blonde hair tucked into a messy bun, greeted him. She wore scrubs patterned with cartoon animals, a small tattoo of a feather curling around her wrist. "Good morning. What can we do for you today?" she asked brightly. Jack nodded toward Scout. "Found him last night during the storm. Figured I'd see if he's chipped. Check for frostbite." Chloe's expression softened. "Poor thing. Dr. Brooks will take a look right away." Moments later, a door swung open and Dr. Ethan Brooks stepped out. In his mid-40s, he had the rugged look of a man who preferred the outdoors to an office. Tall, lean, with sun-tanned skin and salt and pepper hair combed loosely back. A trimmed beard framed a square jaw, and laugh lines bracketed his hazel eyes. He had once served as a field medic in the Army Veterinary Corps, something Jack had heard from locals but never confirmed. "Mercer," Ethan said, voice steady and familiar. "Haven't seen you since you patched that fence for my neighbor." "Guess we both have a thing for fixing what's broken," Jack replied, managing a small smile. Ethan crouched beside Scout, running his hands carefully along the dog's spine. Male, German Shepherd. Older, maybe 10. Malnutrition, dehydration. You can tell by the pads, rough from cold asphalt. But this one's trained. See how he doesn't flinch when I check his paws? He reached for a handheld scanner, a compact RFID reader with a small blue light. When he passed it over Scout's neck, a beep broke the silence. Chloe glanced over the counter. "Got something?" Ethan frowned, reading the data on the small screen. His voice lowered. Registered chip, Colorado State. Patrol K9 Unit. ID number 47CHQ. Name, Scout. Handler, Sergeant Mark Delaney. He paused. Status, missing. Presumed deceased after the 2023 warehouse explosion in Colorado Springs. The words hit Jack like a hammer to the chest. For a second, the sterile smell of the clinic disappeared, replaced by smoke and screaming radios. 2 years ago, he'd been part of a joint winter training near Fort Carson. His unit had coordinated with the State Patrol's K9 team during a rescue simulation, until a real emergency came through. A missing child in the blizzard. It had been Scout who picked up the trail, leading them through waist-deep snow for nearly a mile. The kid survived. A week later, Jack heard that Scout and his handler had died in an explosion. But here the dog was, alive, scarred, breathing. Jesus, Jack murmured, more to himself than anyone. Ethan straightened slowly. You knew the team? Jack nodded. Yeah. Mark Delaney was one of the best handlers I ever met. Quiet guy. Always said his partner could smell the truth before a judge could find it. Chloe hesitated. So, what happens to him now? Ethan looked to Jack. Since you found him, you can sign a temporary custody form. Gives you 30 days while we contact State Patrol. They'll decide if he goes back or stays retired. Jack stared down at Scout. The dog's gaze met his, steady and familiar. He's earned his rest, Jack said quietly. Let's get the paperwork done. An hour later, Jack stepped out of the clinic with the adoption form folded in his jacket pocket. The sun broke briefly through the clouds, setting the snow ablaze with light. Scout walked beside him, limping only slightly now. They drove toward the outskirts of town, tires crunching over frozen gravel. On the passenger seat, Scout sat upright, nose twitching. Jack rolled the window down an inch to let in the cold air, but the dog leaned closer, nostrils flaring. You smell something? Jack asked, half amused. Scout gave a low rumble of a growl, not aggressive, but intent. Then, as they passed the Deer Creek development, an abandoned housing project left unfinished after the company went bankrupt, Scout stood suddenly, pawing at the window. The site was a sprawl of half-built homes, their wooden frames gray and skeletal under the frost. Tarps fluttered like torn flags. Local papers had mentioned thefts, copper wire, equipment, even a police trainee who'd gone missing 2 weeks ago during a patrol check. Jack pulled over, curiosity pricking. Easy, boy. Scout whined, pacing in the seat, eyes fixed on the half-collapsed security fence. He pressed his paw against the door, claws scraping lightly. Jack stared out at the snow-caked sign that read, Deer Creek Estates. Coming 2021, its optimism long dead. Not today, he murmured. We'll come back with backup. He reached over and gently ruffled the fur behind Scout's neck. The dog exhaled and settled down again, but his eyes stayed on the site as they drove off. Back in town, the Blue Spruce Grill looked busier than ever. Through the windows, Jack saw a familiar face at the counter. Mia Turner, the food truck owner from last night. She was showing her phone to a group of diners, their faces lit by the screen's glow. Curiosity pulled him inside. Mia looked up as the bell jingled, her green eyes bright with excitement. You're famous, Mercer, she said. Well, technically he is. She turned her phone toward him. On screen was the video she'd recorded the previous night. Jack kneeling beside Scout, snow swirling around them, firelight glowing behind the glass. The caption read, Sometimes heroes just need a door opened. The video already had over 40,000 views, dozens of comments from people offering food, blankets, and donations for local rescues. Jack blinked. That fast? Internet doesn't sleep, Mia said, smiling. I was thinking, maybe we make this into something more. A podcast series, maybe a docuseries. Second chances. About him. About what happens when the world forgets its heroes. Jack hesitated. You think people care that much about an old dog? She leaned forward. They don't care just about the dog, Jack. They care about what he represents. Scout, resting by Jack's boots, lifted his head and thumped his tail once, as if in quiet agreement. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and relentless. And though neither of them knew it yet, that single video would lead them both into a story far deeper and far darker than either had ever planned to tell. Timber Ridge, Colorado. 2 days later. The morning broke cold and brittle. Sunlight fractured through the snowdrifts that lined the narrow highway. Jack Mercer tightened his coat against the wind, one hand gripping Scout's leash as they stood outside the rusting gate of Deer Creek Estates, the abandoned housing site that had haunted his thoughts since the dog's sudden reaction 2 days ago. Scout stood rigid beside him, ears pricked, nostrils flaring. His breath came in short white bursts, tail stiff like a compass needle locked on something unseen. All right, partner, Jack muttered, unclipping the leash. Show me what's eating you. Scout trotted ahead, moving with the fluid caution of a trained operative. The snow crunched under his paws as he led Jack past a sagging fence and through a row of skeletal half-built homes. Jack followed, boots sinking into slush. The air carried a faint tang of iron and damp concrete. Scout stopped near what had once been a foundation pit. The rebar jutted out like broken bones. He circled twice, then began pawing furiously at a patch of warped plywood half buried beneath the snow. Jack crouched, pulling the boards aside. Beneath them was a half-frozen tool bag, canvas, olive green, with rusted zippers. Inside were wrenches, a flashlight, and something that didn't belong. A police badge, tarnished but still legible. He brushed the snow from its surface and read aloud, Officer Jason Reed. Jason Reed, the rookie cop who'd gone missing 2 weeks ago. Jack's chest tightened. There was more, a faint, acrid scent rising from the ground. He'd smelled it before, cordite and ammonium, the ghosts of old explosives. Scout, he murmured, what the hell did we just step into? Before he could think further, the crackle of tires on gravel made him look up. A Timber Ridge police SUV rolled into the sight, lights off but unmistakable in the daylight. The driver's door swung open, and Captain Sandra Ruiz stepped out. Ruiz was in her mid-50s, compact and broad-shouldered, with streaks of silver in her black hair pulled into a tight bun. Her brown eyes carried the weight of 2 decades of command, sharp, no nonsense, and perpetually assessing. A deep scar along her jaw hinted at an old on-duty injury. She had a reputation in Timber Ridge PD, tough but fair, the kind of leader who expected the best because she had lived the worst. Mercer? She called, her voice cutting through the wind. I should have known it was you out here. Jack straightened. Captain, you're fast. Ruiz eyed the scene. We got a call from a contractor. Said he saw someone moving on the property. Thought maybe kids again. Her gaze dropped to the half-dug hole in the badge in Jack's hand. Guess not. Jack handed it to her carefully. Found under the boards, along with some tools. Smells like residue from old blasting powder. Ruiz examined the badge, her jaw tightening. Reed was assigned to the copper theft task force before he went missing. He was tracking a suspect named Lyle Hargrove, petty thief turned construction supplier. I've heard the name, Jack said. He worked the site here, right? Until the company folded, Ruiz replied. Then he disappeared, same week Reed did. Scout whined softly and began sniffing the air again, tail lowered but tense. Ruiz followed the dog's line of sight toward the far end of the site, where a storage shed leaned against the slope. Whatever you're about to suggest, Mercer, don't. This is an active investigation now. Step back. Jack hesitated. With respect, Captain, that dog might be the best lead you've got. Ruiz's lips twitched. Not a smile, more a reluctant concession. Fine, 10 minutes. But if you step on my evidence markers, I'll cuff you myself. Scout led them to the shed. The metal door groaned as Jack pulled it open. Inside lay piles of old drywall, empty paint cans, and, near the back, footprints, half frozen in the mud. Too deep to be fresh, but recent enough to hold shape. Someone's been squatting here, Ruiz muttered. Or dumping. Scout barked once, sharp and deliberate, then nosed at a small plastic casing wedged under a beam, the remains of a detonator. Ruiz crouched beside it, eyes narrowing. That's identical to the device used in the Colorado Springs warehouse explosion, the one that killed Sergeant Delaney. Jack's stomach dropped. The same explosion where Scout was presumed dead. Ruiz stood, dusting off her gloves. Looks like your dog just connected 2 cases, Mercer. You might have found more than a stray. Back in town that afternoon, Mia Turner sat at her cluttered desk inside the tiny office attached to her food truck. Her laptop was open to a dozen tabs, police archives, newspaper clippings, and her podcast notes. The walls behind her were pinned with index cards, each connected by red string in a web of dates and names. Her dark hair was tied back this time, eyes rimmed with fatigue, but alight with purpose. She'd been digging since morning, tracing the 2023 explosion that killed Sergeant Mark Delaney. There had been whispers, missing evidence, unverified links to stolen construction materials, and a man named Lyle Hargrove, a subcontractor whose name appeared in both Delaney's case and the Deer Creek Project files. When Jack arrived with Scout, Mia swiveled her chair, excitement flickering across her face. "You're not going to believe this," she said, pushing the laptop toward him. Delaney's team was investigating black market explosives before he died. Guess who was their informant? Jack frowned. "Don't say it." "Lyle Hargrove," she confirmed. "And he vanished right after the blast." Scout, lying near the door, lifted his head at the sound of the name, ears twitching. Jack leaned back, exhaling slowly. So the guy the rookie was tailing is the same guy tied to Delaney's death. That's no coincidence. Mia nodded. Exactly. And the internet loves this story. The second episode of my podcast, The Dog Who Came Back from the Fire, hit 30,000 downloads overnight. People are asking for updates. Jack sighed. Let's keep it off the record until Ruiz clears it. This isn't just a story. Mia smiled softly. It's not just a story to me either. That evening, the Blue Spruce Grill buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. A small chalkboard at the door read, Fundraiser Night, Support Timber Ridge K9 Rescue. Behind the counter, Gavin Price, the same manager who'd once tried to chase Scout away, wore a sheepish smile as he poured coffee for guests. His crisp shirt was replaced by a simple sweater, and there was a humbled sincerity in his voice. All proceeds tonight go to the rescue, he said to Jack when he arrived. You and the mutt are the reason people showed up. Jack gave a nod, not unkindly. People change, Gavin. Sometimes they just need a reason. Scout lay by his feet near the fireplace, his coat now cleaner, his posture more confident. The warmth in his eyes had returned. Faint, but real. Mia stood on a small stage near the bar, microphone in hand, speaking to the crowd about the bond between humans and working dogs, about second chances, about how courage doesn't always wear a uniform. As she spoke, a man entered quietly from the back, tall, wearing a dark work jacket dusted with drywall powder. His beard was rough, eyes hidden beneath a baseball cap. Scout's head shot up instantly, his ears stiffened. Jack noticed the change immediately. "Scout?" The dog stood, muscles coiled, nostrils flaring. Then came a low growl, deep, guttural, unlike anything Jack had heard from him since they met. Every hair on the shepherd's back bristled. His gaze locked on the stranger's jacket. Jack followed the line of that stare and saw a faint, almost invisible stain near the cuff. Residue, pale yellow, the kind left by commercial blasting powder. The man paused mid-step, catching Jack's eye, and for a heartbeat, the air between them froze solid. Scout's growl deepened. Jack rose slowly from his chair, heart pounding. The fundraiser's cheerful noise blurred into background hum as he whispered, "Easy, boy. What do you smell?" Scout's response was a sharp bark that shattered the calm, the sound of recognition, and the start of something neither man nor dog could yet name. Timber Ridge, Colorado, late night. The wind moaned low through the empty beams of Deer Creek as if the town itself were holding its breath. Moonlight pooled across the frozen construction site, throwing long shadows that shifted with the snow. Jack Mercer adjusted the collar of his tactical jacket, feeling the bite of the cold as he crouched behind a stack of concrete forms. Beside him, Scout stood perfectly still, a silhouette of muscle and instinct. The dog's black and tan coat glimmered faintly beneath the moonlight, and the small scars along his ribs caught the pale blue shine. His ears were forward, every breath deliberate. The tension radiating from him was something Jack understood. It was the readiness before a breach, the calm that lived inside chaos. Behind them, Captain Sandra Ruiz whispered, "Mercer, report." She was wearing a dark parka over her vest, her gray-streaked hair pulled into a tight braid under a wool cap. The lines around her eyes deepened as she squinted toward the dilapidated warehouse at the back of the site. Her tone carried that rare balance of command and restraint, the voice of someone who'd seen blood and bureaucracy in equal measure. "Scout picked up a scent again," Jack murmured. "Same trace as before. Human sweat. Fear, maybe rope fibers." Ruiz nodded and motioned to two officers behind her, Sergeant Ben Hardy and Officer Lana Cho. Hardy was built like a boulder, mid-40s, broad-shouldered, with a beard turning white around the edges. Cho was younger, lithe, sharp-eyed, her expression calm, but her fingers twitching near the trigger guard, a rookie still learning how to hide nerves. They moved as a unit through the ruins of Deer Creek. Scout led the line, nose low to the ground, tail cutting slow arcs through the cold air. The scent trail wove through unfinished walls until it reached the back lot, a forgotten service road leading to an old storage warehouse, long abandoned. The building crouched against the slope, its corrugated walls rusted and half-collapsed. A single bulb flickered above the loading dock, casting an anemic cone of yellow. Scout halted near the metal door, body tightening. His hackles rose slightly, but his bark never came. He simply looked at Jack, the way soldiers once looked at team leaders when words weren't needed. Jack pressed a gloved hand to the cold steel. He's sure. Ruiz studied the door. We do this clean, she said. No heroics. Jack gave a thin smile. That's never been my style. Using his SEAL training, he examined the hinges, then the latch. It wasn't locked from the inside. Only a slide bolt, rusted but intact. He slipped a flat bar from his belt, eased it beneath the bolt, and levered it up without a sound. The door cracked open on a hinge that screamed softly in protest. Ruiz raised her hand, signaling silence. Hardy and Cho moved in first, weapons drawn. Jack and Scout followed. The air inside was heavy with damp and oil. Dust motes swirled in the beams of their flashlights. Scout moved ahead, paws making no sound on the concrete. Then he froze, nose twitching, body rigid. Front corner, Jack whispered. Their lights swung that way and caught a figure slumped against a pillar. A man, bound at the wrists and ankles, gagged with duct tape. He blinked rapidly as the lights hit him. The name tag still pinned crookedly to his jacket read, Reed. Officer Jason Reed, Ruiz breathed. Alive. Cho darted forward, cutting the restraints. Reed gasped as air hit his lungs, his face pale beneath streaks of grime. He looked barely 24, hair disheveled, stubble shadowing his jaw. Easy, kid, Hardy said, kneeling beside him. You're safe now. Reed's voice came out hoarse. There's another one. Outside. Guarding. Before anyone could respond, the back door banged open. A shadow bolted across the yard. Tall, thin, wearing a heavy jacket. Scout lunged without hesitation, barking once, deep and thunderous. Jack released the leash. The German shepherd exploded forward, covering ground in seconds. The man turned to run, slipping on the ice. Scout hit him mid-stride, driving him down. Jack sprinted after, restraining the animal just as Ruiz and Hardy arrived. Hands where I can see them, Hardy barked, pressing a knee into the suspect's shoulder. The man froze. His beanie had fallen, revealing greasy blonde hair and a gaunt face. His clothes were caked in drywall dust and grime. A construction worker gone to ruin. Ruiz crouched beside him, her flashlight cutting through the dark. Name? She demanded. The man spat into the snow. You got no right. Name, Ruiz repeated, sharper. Cal Tanner, he muttered. I just keep watch. Ruiz's eyes narrowed. For who? Tanner said nothing, but when she patted his jacket, she found a cell phone and a folded receipt. The phone's cracked screen glowed faintly, messages still open. Ruiz handed it to Jack. The texts were short, coded, but one name stood out again and again. Lyle Hargrove. Jack exhaled. It's him. Ruiz nodded grimly. Get Tanner in the car. And Mercer. Good work. As they loaded the suspect, Jack turned back toward the warehouse. Scout was standing beside Officer Reed, tail wagging slowly, head tilted as if checking on him. Reed reached down, trembling, to touch the dog's muzzle. He wouldn't stop, Reed said weakly. Every time I moved, that dog outside growled, but I heard another bark further off, like someone telling me to hold on. Jack met Ruiz's eyes. Scout heard him. Inside the warehouse, Hardy and Cho swept the rest of the floor. They found crates marked Deer Creek Materials, but inside were copper coils, blasting caps, and bags of ammonium nitrate. evidence of a smuggling chain running straight through the construction project. Ruiz looked over the inventory tags. These matched the lot numbers from the 2023 explosion. Delaney must have been closing in before it happened. And Hargrove made sure it never did, Jack said quietly. Ruiz pocketed her gloves. We'll get him now. Tanner's phone gives us the trail. Jack crouched beside Scout, scratching behind his ear. The shepherd's breathing was heavy, his sides rising and falling fast. His fur was wet from melted snow, but his eyes burned with steady light. Easy, old boy, Jack murmured. You've done enough. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed from outside, a truck door slamming in the dark. Reed flinched instinctively, but before anyone could react, Scout moved. The shepherd stepped between Reed and the noise, body low, ears back, silent but unyielding. Even in exhaustion, his instinct was the same. Protect. Ruiz watched, expression softening. He doesn't forget his duty, does he? Jack smiled faintly. Neither do soldiers. They waited, hearts thudding, until Hardy's voice came through the radio. Clear, just the wind and an empty truck. Ruiz gave the all clear. The team began packing up evidence, their breath rising in pale clouds. As the convoy rolled out, Jack looked in the rearview mirror. Scout sat in the back seat, head resting on the window frame, watching the warehouse fade into white. For the first time since finding him, Jack realized the dog wasn't just chasing memories. He was finishing a mission. The first sunlight in a week poured across Timber Ridge like a quiet apology. The snow had stopped falling, but white drifts still hugged the rooftops, softening the edges of the town square. Flags rippled gently in the breeze as people gathered near the old courthouse steps. Men in winter coats, children bundled in scarves, shop owners who had closed early just to witness what was about to happen. A small stage had been set up under the oak tree, its branches still heavy with ice. Captain Sandra Ruiz stood at the podium in her dark navy uniform, medals glinting against her chest. The sharp winter air painted her cheeks a deeper shade of bronze, but her eyes were steady, proud. She looked down at the two figures standing before her. Jack Mercer, tall and broad-shouldered in his worn leather jacket, and Scout, the German shepherd who sat upright beside him, tail curled neatly around his paws. Today, Ruiz began, her voice clear against the wind, we honor not only a police department victory, but a bond between two survivors, one man, one dog, who reminded us what courage truly looks like. She lifted a small silver tag, the Timber Ridge K9 Honor Medal. For exceptional service, valor, and instinct beyond the call of duty, I present this to K9 Scout, Honorary Deputy of the Timber Ridge Police Department. The crowd broke into applause. Scout tilted his head, as if trying to understand the noise. Jack smiled and knelt so Ruiz could clip the medal to the dog's collar. The shepherd blinked once and then wagged his tail, not wildly, just one calm, measured sweep, the kind that said, "Mission complete." From the edge of the crowd, Mia Turner raised her phone, filming through teary eyes. She looked different now, her hair loose and wind-tossed, the fatigue of long nights replaced by something softer. Her podcast episode, The Dog Who Came Back from Fire, had gone viral statewide. But for Mia, it wasn't about numbers anymore. It was about finishing the story she didn't know she was part of. Beside her stood Gavin Price, the restaurant manager once known for his rigid rules and ironed shirts. He wore a thick wool coat now, face more open, hands shoved into his pockets as he watched the ceremony with genuine pride. He leaned toward Mia. "You know," he said. We're turning that fundraiser into an annual event. The Scout Fund helps train and retire K9s properly. Mia smiled. Redemption looks good on you, Gavin. He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Guess we all needed a second chance. When the ceremony ended, the crowd dispersed slowly, stopping to pat Scout or shake Jack's hand. A few children knelt to take photos with the decorated shepherd, who endured the attention with patient dignity. Ruiz approached one last time, handing Jack a small envelope. Official adoption approval, she said. He's yours now, though I think he already decided that. Jack took it with a grin. Thank you, Captain. As the square emptied, Jack and Scout walked home through the quiet streets, their breath forming twin clouds in the cold. Timber Ridge felt different now. Lighter, as though the town itself had thawed. At home, Jack hung his old Navy SEAL jacket on the hook beside the door and tossed a log into the fireplace. Scout circled his new bed once, then settled beside it. Jack placed a clean metal bowl by the hearth, right next to his old combat boots, the pair he hadn't touched since leaving service. They looked strangely fitting there, side by side. Worn boots and a new bowl, the past and present sharing the same corner of warmth. The smell of bread filled the small cabin as Jack toasted thick slices and spread butter until it melted in gold streaks. He poured himself a cup of black coffee and took the chair near the fire. Scout's head rested against his knee, eyes half closed. Outside, snow whispered against the windows. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Mia. The episode hit #1 in Colorado, but the best part wasn't the listeners. It was watching you two find your way back. Jack smiled faintly, typing back, "He found it first. I just followed." Minutes later, headlights cut briefly across the wall, a car pulling up outside. Jack frowned. Through the frosted glass, he saw a figure step out, coat collar up, face obscured. The man paused by the gate, looking toward the cabin before turning away. For a moment, Jack thought it was just a lost driver, but then he noticed the walk. A slight limp, deliberate, familiar. Scout's ears twitched. He lifted his head, muscles tightening. Jack stood and stepped closer to the window, but the man had already disappeared down the road. Only footprints marked the snow, deep, even, military. Jack exhaled, unsettled, before turning back toward the fire. Scout hadn't moved from the rug, but his gaze lingered on the door, quiet and alert. "Easy, partner," Jack said softly, rubbing the dog's neck. "We've had enough ghosts for one lifetime." But Scout didn't relax. He stared at the door a moment longer, then laid his head back down, ears still half raised, listening. Outside, the snow began again, falling thicker this time, swallowing the tracks one by one until the road was clean. In Timber Ridge, the night folded into silence. Inside the cabin, a metal caught the firelight and glowed faintly, the inscription glimmering beneath the reflection of the flames. "For loyalty beyond duty." And though Jack closed his eyes, somewhere in the wind beyond the window came a faint echo, the sound of boots crunching through snow, moving closer,